So my name is David Cox. I take my coffee black, Nespresso style though, so I don't actually make it. I just push the button.
We're back with another MLOps community podcast. I'm your host, Demetrios, and talking with David. We got into the ways that you can look at machine learning, specifically unsupervised machine learning, to help you change the way that you interact with this world. Behavioral economics was something that I learned, and I hope you do too. Let's get into it with him right now. And I will say, just as a disclaimer, this was a different kind of philosophical conversation. We did not get super technical on how you can deploy these models and what kind of specs we're looking at, what kind of QPSs and all those other fun acronyms that we like to use. But I still had a blast talking to him and going on all kinds of tangents. And I hope you do too. We should probably start with you're in Florida and you're wearing sweaters. How is that possible?
Yeah. Re- Theory of relativity applies even to temperatures, I guess, right? Yeah.
And I'm in Germany wearing t-shirts. I
Yeah.
don't
Yeah. Yeah. What is the temp there for you these days, I guess?
I do Celsius. I
Okay.
have been converted, so it is 0, and
Okay.
the last couple days it was like -5, which for the people out there that do Fahrenheit, obviously 0 is 32, but -5 is like, yeah, in the 20s, I think, high 20s, mid 20s.
That is frigid. I don't think I'd leave my house if it were that cold here in Florida.
Yeah, it's funny how you get used to it. It really
Oh,
is.
yeah. Absolutely, and I mean, I grew up in Colorado, and a lot of people, as soon as they hear that, they go like, "Wait a second," but yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. I've been in Florida too long, I guess, but
You you got acclimated to it, man. That's too good. Well, the, interesting things that I wanna talk to you about are not at all around LLMs. I think we started off this conversation and we really wanted to have this conversation because there is so much more happening in AI than just the LLM boom and the agent boom and the uh whatever insert your next type word boom
yeah.
in here, right?
Yeah.
What are you working on these days?
Yeah. So I work, and it may help to give it a little context on my background.
Yeah.
That may help. I got into AI mainly from like behavior science space. Technically, like clinical work with humans, but you can think about what we're doing as more like behavioral ecology, but applied to humans. That is, you look at the environment around people. How might you change that to change behavior, like workplace settings, right, or clinically things like that? Um, and so then, how I got into AI stuff I'm working on now is you can imagine the environment is incredibly rich,
Yeah.
all sorts of stimuli that we respond to influences our behavior. Um, and mid 2010s, all of a sudden, a bunch of research started coming out. AI is better at doctors than X and Y and Z. And so I was, researcher interested in human decision making. I was like, what is this thing? Um, and that kind of pulled me over into, again, kind of where I'm working now is, how can we take information from the larger environment, sensory modalities, wearable technologies, things like that. And from those data, understand why people do what they do, and then use that to then help them make better decisions, healthier decisions, live
Wow.
happier, healthier lives. So,
So it's
um,
not thinking about what the diseases are from signals from wearables or from blood tests and all that. It's more, why are people deciding to stay on the couch or eat those
exactly.
foods, that pizza that I love? Why do I choose that on Saturday instead of some broccoli and hummus?
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right. And what's kind of fun about that in the area of kind of psychology that I got my training in behavior analysis, there's this kind of pocket of literature called say-do correspondence.
Uh-huh.
Basically, the idea is that we don't always do what we say or what we, if you were to ask me why do you eat broccoli or pizza instead of broccoli, I might say something, but that doesn't always match up with my behavior or the reasons that I might actually do something. And, if you look at the data, you really get into it. And so that's
Wow.
kind of this really interesting dichotomy, kind of circling back to LLMs, right? If language text based, interesting, but may not give us all the information we need to understand, why do you do what you do? And how can
Yeah.
I use that to help you make better choices?
So what are some things that you look at?
So it's interestingly enough, and this is kind of where I also touch point mid 2010s kind of brought me to AI. Um, Reinforcement learning, I'm guessing a lot of listeners are familiar with. There's a whole pocket of biological literature, reinforcement learning with biological organisms, been around, 100 years, 150 years. And so we look at a lot of the same stuff. You're a rat in an operant chamber, you're a human, scrolling through Twitter, whatever. There's going to be a bunch of stimuli that are kind of presented to you. That comes before some behavior you engage in. After you engage that behavior, something happens, right? I make a tweet and someone clicks the like button, and that kind of unit, that's antecedent behavior consequence chain, is what we kind of talk about. You can analyze those over time. And from that, I can start predicting, based on the behavior you engaged in, what's a reward or a reinforcer for you. And then I can start using that to predict what you'll do next. Um, Twitter, Meta, they all use these same algorithms for human behavior, right?
Yep.
We're just talking about doing that in context of like health behavior.
Yeah. That's why I have so many notifications when I sign on to LinkedIn.
And you can't seem to not get distracted by them because they're so good at getting your
Yeah.
attention. Yeah.
It is killer. And so then how are you trying to help people make the right decisions from that?
Oh, yeah,
And
sure.
basically, like, I still think break it down, like, the data that you're gathering is more on how many steps I'm taking,
Oh,
and
sure. Yeah, it could be.
like, it's more exercise or deals with the body, or it's also how much screen time I have.
Yeah. Could be all related, right? So you can
Okay.
imagine, yeah, I'm not sure how much you sleep. 24 hours in a day minus hours you sleep, you get that many hours of behavior. Um, so you can think within this kind of total set of behavior, there's some really it's called the matching law, known principles of biological organisms. You tend to allocate the amount of time to an activity that corresponds with the amount of reward that you get from that thing. So, if I'm looking to say change your physical number of steps that you take, physical activity levels, I would look and see, how much time do you walk now? What else do you do in your day? What are those kind of things that you find rewarding? Netflix, right? Or whatever, maybe scrolling Twitter, all that kind of fun stuff. And then the question becomes, is there a way that you can contact more reward for physical activity than maybe you do from, say, Netflix or something? So you can a lot of the and this you can imagine has a lot of therapeutic implications. If I'm engaging in a lot of substance abuse, I spent some time doing some research in that area. I want to get you to shift away from, cocaine to something else that's maybe a bit more healthier. So you try to figure out what can I create to compete with the reward that you get from that maybe unhealthy behavioral pattern to healthy, shift it to some kind of healthier behavior pattern. Um, but, now we're also talking like these are data issues, right? Amazing in theory. How do I get the data for you that allows me to really understand your day? And fortunately for the line of work I'm in, the last 10 years has been incredible, right? Technology just allows us to collect so much data on so much more than we could even
Yeah.
15, 20 years ago.
And
But still
there's a few
yeah,
things like
non-trivial challenge. Yeah.
Apple Watches and the Whoop
Yeah.
and
Oh, yeah.
whatever, Aura
Come
Ring.
on. Yeah.
Yeah, me
Oh, yeah.
too. Yeah, but the part that I am not clear on still is how are you proactively trying to associate more dopamine or serotonin or whatever is released in the brain when I exercise more or when I take more steps? How do you make that connection?
Yeah, yeah. So there's kind of a fundamental, some going back to that idea of the matching law, that behavior flows where reinforcement flows is kind of the fun phrase in there, right? So if I can look at your behavior across the day, baseline before I'm doing anything, I can roughly see, you spend 3 hours on Netflix, 10 minutes walking. There's a lot of value in Netflix. What's going on there? How can I take something of that and provide it for, you can only access it, let's say, through physical activity. One kind of popular phrase for these kinds of interventions is contingency management. Very simple, a lot of research settings. Maybe you'd prefer to sit on your couch, but what if I give you $20 for hitting your step count today? What if I give you
Nice.
$50 a day, $100 a day, right? You can kind of start increasing the value and kind of putting on these extra reward contingencies, they're called, right? So they don't occur in the natural environment. but you can supplement, augment, add on to the reward value for the healthy behavior to get it to shift. And then clinically, usually the challenge is, all right, amazing. You can get changes in physical activity for like less than $1 a day. You can get people hitting their step counts.
Wow.
The challenge then becomes kind of like what you were leaning into a little bit, I think, is amazing that I'm now walking, but do I now find walking intrinsically rewarding so you can actually fade out those extra rewards and things
Yep.
I've added on there? Some people that's easier. Others, that's more challenging. There's kind of research ongoing there. That's the basic idea, how you kind of analyze it and think about it.
How are you reaching out to people? How are you setting up these? Do I just say, hey, whatever app it is, you have
Yes,
unlimited, untethered
you're
access
right.
to all of my data, like the Whoop
Yeah.
and my screen time and everything that I'm doing to help me become a better person from goals that I've set?
Yeah. Wouldn't that be nice if you would give
That
me
would
that?
be great.
Yeah, no, that, yeah,
I
a few
would give it
people.
to you. Honestly, like, I don't even care about any data privacy, but we could go over how you are keeping my PII clean.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. No, and I should say, like, at this point, data challenge is a real thing. Most
Yeah.
of the work that I get into is in clinical settings, so, like, behavioral health settings where we have people coming in for therapy. I then know the totality, what's going on in that session, right? I'm presenting, maybe different learning trials, they might be called, things like that. Right, you're trying to work on, I don't know, improving your speech articulation, right? Someone that's seen, like, a speech therapist or something. Bring them in. I know the behavior I'm trying to change. I have all the data because 'cause they're in my context on, when I'm presenting you different words to say, how exactly are you saying them back? If we're working on, like, different, pairings, chains of, uh, sounds that you might emit, right? What does that look like? Where do you start to make mistakes and things like that? So much easier to get the data that you need in the types of clinical settings that I'm kind of working.
Yeah.
That, like, pro health behavior, daily life. I've set up a few systems for myself just with, my Whoop, time tracking, screen time, and things like that. Maybe there's a product play down the road. I don't know. I'm a researcher, scientist first and foremost, but, yeah, the data challenge is a real deal, but most of the stuff, yeah, is a clinical setting. It's kinda where I
Well,
work.
because if it does feel like what I want needs to have such a 360 view of who
Absolutely.
I am, and
Yeah.
it needs to understand all of my habits, the good, the bad, the ugly, and I think about how could I have a product in my life that has almost like God mode?
Yeah, 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 yeah. That's exactly right. Yeah.
And you're doing it from your side, which is almost like the only way that it can happen, right? I know I've had friends who would plug into their Aura Ring API and then create different scripts that could run off of that, which feels like the only way. It's like very hacker-esque right
Oh, it's
now.
incredibly hacker-esque. Yeah. And that's kind of what I've done in my own life too, going back to this idea of, like, the matching law, right? So I've been for 15 years tracking wake up to when I fall asleep. How do I spend my time?
Wow.
Whoop data, right? Same thing. I have custom scripts pulled in, Strava, kind
Yep.
of all that fun stuff, Peloton. Um, but it's hard. I know there's still gaps in the day that are missing. And this is where, again, like, I get really excited about what's possible 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and how so much of this stuff, right? You think physiological data, um, that's not really an LLM call. It's not like text-based. It's
No.
just raw, physio tensors make this beautiful to play with. Um, and so it's, yeah, but you're exactly right. It's God mode, right? How do you get data on enough stuff? Maybe you don't need data on everything, but on enough things from my life that I can impact those things that are most meaningful to me when I think about what are my values, like what does it mean to live a good life?
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
Well, especially if you're like me and you try and set goals. I'm always trying to get better. And I imagine if I knew a lot more about what you know about, I would be better at giving myself the rewards to create those habits. Like reading Atomic Habits was not good enough for me to become the
Yeah.
perfect man that I'm trying to be.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, incredible.
Sadly, that did not work. But uh, if I if there were the possibility of an app to be able to understand me and have access to everything and then help me with the goals that I'm trying to get. Like just a simple thing that I'm trying to do these days. and I find it very difficult because it's breaking habits and putting new ones in, is read before bed. I read when I wake up really easily, but reading before bed for some reason is really hard. I would prefer to scroll TikTok.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, who wouldn't prefer to scroll TikTok?
Yeah.
But, um,
Yeah, I can't fault me for it, but still, like, I wanna yeah, I feel
yeah,
like I
yeah.
could do it.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, there is a whole like body of scientific literature called self-management, comes from the same behavior science literature. How can we, rather than having others impose these rewards for us, how can we do it for ourselves? And there are a bunch of strategies, like off the cuff, someone might throw out like, when you go to bed, rather than have your phone next to you with your alarm, it's across the room. So
Oh,
I
yeah.
set my alarm, I set it down, and then that increasing the effort to go get it to then scroll TikTok probably going to prevent me, especially if my book's right here, right? So like setting that differential effort is like one strategy to make things. Most people choose the less effortful option.
Oh,
So you can
that's
do stuff like
great.
that. There's a whole rich literature. What's kind of fun about it for me is going back again, like this Say Do correspond, all that kind of fun stuff. We've known about all this stuff for decades. Implementing it is hard. Getting data on your own behavior can sometimes be hard. And we also we're not always aware of the reasons why we might pick that habit we're trying to break. I want to do something different, but I find myself doing the same thing. I also have a sweet tooth every night after dinner. I just can't break that one. But you start collecting data and analyzing your behavior over time, and you can start to understand, it's XYZ. These are the reasons why TikTok is so appealing to me
Oh,
before I go to bed.
interesting.
Yeah.
And so how does this play into AI? How are
Oh,
you
yeah, sure.
using AI for these type of insights?
Yeah. So, again, going kind of back to the clinical space, because that's where I spent most of my time. I've done some of this with my own kind of quantified self data, um, but more in the clinical space. So you imagine you have a lot of this data, again, going back to this idea of clinical decision making. Um, there's a lot of stuff that's come out. I'm not sure if you read the book Nudge. Long story, Kat Sunstein and Richard Thaler, I believe.
What was
Um,
it about? Because I feel like
so
I've
the
heard.
basic idea, yeah, it's this pocket of research, behavior science, a little slightly different area, but similar as ideas called behavioral economics. Basically, the idea is that traditional economic theory, all humans are rational agents. We optimize. We always choose the best course of action, and that's when we make decisions, we're always optimizing, maximizing. But, you look around at humans, I don't know, we smoke, we drink way too we make a lot of suboptimal decisions is like the fancy
Yeah.
phrase. And so the question this book nudges, what are all the ways that we might nudge ourselves to quit making these suboptimal decisions to make better decisions for ourselves and whatnot. Um, that you can imagine that's also been applied to the clinical decision-making literature, right? There's one study, 2016, third leading cause of death in the United States was physician errors, right? They made the wrong choice,
Damn.
somebody died.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so going back to this idea, we have a lot of data. People are in these clinical contexts, healthcare professionals. They want to do the right thing, but they may not always make the best choice. And they may not always be aware of all the data and the things around them that could inform their decision. So where AI comes in and the things that I get excited about, and we have one thing that we built that's patent pending. You can you can imagine I have this data. First thing I can do, unsupervised machine learning, right? All these different patients, let's just start finding different kind of patient groups, patient cohorts, patient profiles, whatever you want to call 'em. Persona in marketing, same basic idea, right? Different patterns of clinical presentation that might then inform how I intervene, how I prevent some kind of clinical intervention. So unsupervised machine learning comes in there, allows us to identify really interesting groupings. Next phase, usually in some kind of healthcare setting, I'm trying to maximize patient outcomes. Classic supervised learning task. All right, I have this kind of a patient profile. Given everything I know about their clinical presentation and where I want them to be, what can I do clinically as a therapist to help move behavior in that direction and not in some other direction? Again, clinical decision making, helping make optimal decisions versus suboptimal decisions. And even those in and of themselves, you can imagine, you're starting to probably wrap around all sorts of different ML models, chaining ensembles together. Most people, when they enter some kind of therapeutic context, it's rarely one goal that they're working on. They may have 10, 20, right? So now you have like hierarchical things, you have decision trees. I mean, it gets incredibly exciting. But this is what, going back to the kind of main theme that we wanted or started talking about. Um, there's so much complexity there, and I also need this thing to be controlled, compliant, transparent, all those fun things that, you don't necessarily need an LLM for. Probabilistic outputs is also dangerous in healthcare settings, right? I need it to be discriminative AI. It needs to be very good at what I'm asking it to do. Um, yeah, and that's yeah, a lot of the work that I spent my time doing the last 10 years or so.
I imagine there's a lot of room for folks to come in and either say that they've changed when they haven't, or they have changed. It's just they changed for a week and then they fall off the wagon again. How
Yeah.
do you like weed those out?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So for the first one, for those that may say and they may genuinely believe it, right?
Yeah.
I'm a new man, right? I'm a new person. Um, Getting data on that behavior.
That has been me, I will say, and like just so we're clear.
Yeah, yeah. I'm off my sweet tooth kick, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
I started ice baths and now I'm a new man. I'm
yeah,
reading
yeah.
before bed. It's all good.
Yeah. And so in that context, therapeutically, if I was your therapist, love that you're telling me that every day though, I'd be asking you to collect data on your behavior in some capacity, or we'd figure out a way. So you could say that, but then we'd look at your data and say, well, but your behavior, like that was a spike. Your your behavior hasn't quite changed to the level that you were after or whatever. So that's kind of one way. The other thing that you're talking about is this idea of a popular phrase that people might be familiar with is like relapse, right?
Yeah.
I got better, then I went back to my old patterns of behavior. Um, this is a kind of classic behavioral pattern studying in the behavior science literature. You can kind of think of like almost like a time series forecasting challenge, right? What are the variables in the environment that, when they combine, allow me to predict that you're going to relapse versus instances that you won't? Um, and then you can start again, same idea. You need the data, but I can start saying again, amazing that you said you took ice baths. You have this pattern of behavior in your history, Demetrios. I can tell you're gonna relapse next week. Let's let you stay on the straight and narrow, or whatever. Or, add in these additional therapeutic resources or whatever to get you over the hump this time, so you won't relapse or whatnot.
It reminds me a little bit. Do you ever feel like it's a little Minority Report-esque where
Oh,
you're
yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, so full confession at this moment in life, like, I'm a kid of the Matrix era,
Yeah.
kinda came up, Matrix era, Minority Report, saw those, Ex Machina, all that stuff was going on right when I was, in my PhD for behavior science, starting to work in AI, and I mean, the idea is incredibly intoxicating, right? And I think what's also interesting is if you look at a lot of tech companies, arguably they're not to that same full extent, but they're using these same ideas, right? How can I make my product more addicting to keep your eyeballs on it?
Yeah.
What we're talking about is like we can do that exact same thing, but to help people live healthier, happier, better lives. We
Yeah.
can use it in kind of both ways, but yeah, very. I mean, I think that Minority Report future is coming at some point. Or
Well,
yeah,
and I'm 100% behind you on I would much rather have what you're doing than me being subject to social media or my own vices and have it just happen to me passively with or without me knowing it, you know?
yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I really like that idea that you kind of mentioned of like, maybe turning some of this system randomly, like turn that into a product and give it back to the user to say, hey, connect in what you want. I'm not gonna and you I mean, we could run stuff on the edge these days. Like I don't need to collect your data or save it anywhere. But give that back to the user and say, connect in whatever you want to get the data in there that you need, state your values, and then just build a model on Demetrios' behavior, right?
Yep.
Build a custom model for you and nudge you, recommend you. There's a whole body of literature called just-in-time adaptive interventions. Basic idea is, at that moment of choice, right before you make some kind of unhealthy decision, you get a nudge or a prompt or something to make you
Ooh,
make the
I
healthier
love that.
alternative. So
So
it's one of the
basically, when I am right about to grab my phone before bed, it's like, "Oh,
Ding.
remember that
Next
book?"
Netflix. Yeah.
Or,
Have your that's
you know what I think about a lot as something that I wanna start doing is just before I read a book to my kids for bed, I shut off the phone, and just the act of having the phone off and then having to restart it is enough of a barrier for me to say, "Ah, fuck it, I'll read a book."
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I love it. Yeah, so you're already thinking about this idea. If I increase effort or the delay to the reward, classic examples that we know reduce its value. So,
Yeah.
what's more immediate, lower effort, we tend to choose those things. So,
Yeah,
yeah, put the carrots at the front of the fridge with the cake behind it, you know. And I'm still gonna go for the cake because it's just so good.
and so I'm constantly trying to figure out those efficiencies, and I imagine you start to see areas where you can do more, and just from me talking to you, I really appreciate this because I recognize that one thing I wanna do, and it's that do say dissonance in
Yeah.
my own life is I constantly tell myself I'm gonna go to bed early, and before I go to sleep, I'm gonna read a few pages and then go to sleep and nail all my sleep score
Yeah.
goals, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
be the perfect man. And that only happens when I'm traveling on my own. When it's at home, it's a disaster usually. And thinking about it in the way of how can I set up more friction is something that I didn't necessarily actively do. It was more that I would do it in a way that I just recognized, "Oh, yeah, like, I don't sleep with my phone in the room.
Mhm.
I sleep with it outside in my living room, and
Nice.
that's one thing that I make sure to do because I recognize that I don't look at it in the morning, and I read in the morning, right? And so doing it the reverse way and just shutting it off before I read my kids a book
Yeah.
is setting that friction consciously and then, like, regaining a bit more of my willpower.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. The other thing I think that's interesting that you said is that it's easier for you to do when you're traveling. So the other thing that I'd be curious about is like what happens like as you're leading up to the end of the night that makes TikTok that much more valuable? Like are you I don't know, like you already jacked up and you're like, yeah, now I also need to get some TikTok. Whereas on the road, maybe it's you're already calmer and so you're like, I'm gonna get into a book. Yeah, those are most behavior is what we call multiply controlled, right? Dozens or hundreds of things coming to influence it.
Wow.
So it's trying to figure out, what are the main things or the things that I might be able to tweak or tug on to get the behavior I want versus the one I don't. But
Yeah, I imagine it's not only the behaviors that you can tweak or tug on, it's the ones that if you tweak and tug on them, they're going to have a domino effect in what you
exactly.
end up doing.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly right. It's funny you say that. A, a couple. So I also I'm faculty at the Endicott College. Has some docs here. We're working on a paper right now. This idea we call it keystone contingencies. If you're familiar with like keystone species and like ecology, so the
No.
basic idea there is look at Yellowstone National Park. Right, you have some kind of ecological system. There's a species within it that if you were to remove them, like the wolf the
Oh,
whole
yeah.
ecosystem would, like, reorganize, and they learned this the hard way, and they reintroduced whatever. So we're kinda a bunch of other, areas have played around the same idea, keystone social people in social networks, keystone actors and corporate America, whatever. We're playing around with this idea of keystone contingencies, like in your own life, same idea, right? Is there one behavior or thing that I might change that has this ripple effect throughout the rest of my day? And for me, like, it's running in the morning. Um, if I run in the morning, I drink less alcohol the night before. My diet tends to be better, I'm more focused at work. And it's like that one thing, if I can tweak that, more a better day. Not
Yeah.
optimal yet,
It's a
but
keystone moment. It's like this
exactly.
pillar. I also think there's a lot to be said for how you end up seeing yourself
Yeah.
and like what you identify as. You identify as a runner now, and
Mhm. Oh, yeah.
it is something like, well, if I'm a runner, I gotta run. And
Yeah, yeah,
so
yeah.
that,
Oh, fair. Yeah, yeah. And if you're a nighttime reader,
yeah,
you're gonna have to read before
exactly.
the nighttime, yeah.
That's exactly it. Like, you end up doing these things because you identify as that.
Yeah, yeah. Agree with that. Yeah.
I can't remember where I heard that, but it was in something it might have been Atomic Habits, or it might have been some other habits book on how it's much easier to create a habit if you identify as that type
Oh,
of
yeah, sure. I
whatever.
could see
Like,
that.
if you're a smoker and you identify as a smoker, it's a lot harder to kick the habit of smoking because it's like, yeah, I'm a smoker.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And there's some really decent literature suggesting that even kind of like at the same thing, the language that we use can add value to activities or whatever, which kind of fits the same idea, right? If I call myself a smoker, then it
Yeah.
adds more value to the cigarette in addition to the nicotine. As you know, if I'm a non-smoker, but I happen to hit it, same nicotine, same stuff going in, but just that bit of language can change the reward value, which is kind of crazy to think about. I mean, humans are nuts.
Yeah, and this is also something that is fascinating to look at through a machine learning model.
Oh, absolutely. Incredibly fascinating.
Are there certain ways or certain sentence structures that for you tend to encapsulate you in certain behaviors? Thinking about the sentence structures and analyzing the way that if somebody comes in and they are speaking in certain ways, is that indicative of certain actions type?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. And there's a whole body of research called framing effects that kind of studies this kind of stuff.
Yep.
But yeah, no, and I think the other thing, go back to like how AI, ML, I'm personally just enamored with unsupervised machine learning. This idea that I don't know what I don't know, and it's
Yeah.
gonna like tell me stuff like that's just incredibly intoxicating to me. So what I think, kind of going back to this too, where AI would be interesting is, why you come in, just like talk about things that you feel you do well, things you don't do well. Can I analyze that behavior, understand like your frame of reference, your perspective, and then, there are some cultures, they have different colors for white that I've never perceived, right? Just this idea that AI can wrap around language as a human phenomena. And then can I bring that into that maybe therapeutic setting and say, hey, here's how you talk and perceive the world. Here's an alternative perspective that you may not have even known existed that may help you. Like maybe we can get you to frame things in this different way. And then we can again go back to the data. Does this actually change your behavior? Yes, no. Probability of relapse, like all that kind of fun stuff. But
Mhm. It it almost feels like, and this is where I'm drifting into the AI hype territory because you gotta be really or careful as you are doing this, but I know there's a lot of people that will talk to OpenAI's real-time API or, like, the voice component.
Dan.
It's very shaky, and anybody that's used it knows that it's not amazing. But I see a potential world where you're sending a voice memo and you're just blabbering on
Yeah.
with a few different prompts, and then that gets analyzed. And potentially you can do it with an LLM at first, but then you get more specific and more
Oh
uh,
yeah.
fine-tuned models, fine-tuned for you and what you're going through, I guess, if it's needed.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Have you seen the movie Her?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I feel like that's kind of, it's the thing that's with you that hears your language pattern, sees what you sees, and it can, tap into the collective conscious, but then build models specific for you and kind of what you're after. And then again, from my angle, there's no reason we can't do that and help everybody live happier, healthier lives. It doesn't always have to be. I mean, there's the downside to any technology. If this exists,
Yeah.
bad actors will do what they do. But
How are other ways that you've seen and you like what you're seeing with unsupervised machine learning?
oh, sure. So another kind of similar flavor, but now in the education context, because I work, higher ed, teach classes, things
Yeah.
like that. But same idea with students. And I did some work with a company called Glimpse K-12 when I was doing my data science postdoc. But similar idea where I can take patterns of behavior in educational settings, assessment scores, whatever, from that, identify kids that may need more resources to be successful in a classroom setting. And if you're a teacher or whatever, you have 30 kids, 20 kids, 30 kids. It's hard to give everybody what they need to succeed. And so if you can use any kind of unsupervised machine or any kind of method to identify learner types, student types, whatever, to then match kids up with resources so that they have a higher probability of being successful, learning the things they need to learn. Um, Personalized systems of instruction are another big thing, right? Rather than every kid getting the same set of tasks on the chalkboard. Johnny's going to get one set of math problems. Elizabeth's going to get another set because they're just different students, different skill
Yeah.
sets, different resources. But
Yeah,
um,
different ways of learning. I
yeah,
actually, back when I used to live in Spain, I was teaching, and you learn right away that each student is very different in how they learn and what they need to learn. And some are visual, some are auditory, some need to speak and all that. And I come back to the idea of we see so many, or we hear about how small groups tend to be the most effective when it comes to
yeah.
teaching, or just one-on-one, and then you can be very personalized. And so how can we, as you're saying, create modules that are personalized for each individual, that are hitting their needs? Instantly, I think about, how do you get the data? How do you have the context to know what each individual needs, right?
Oh,
Because
yeah.
if I'm just coming into school on day one, you don't know that I like to listen more and I learn through auditory methods.
Yeah, assessment scores is the only thing that a lot of places have right now. Where I've seen, and even some of my own work, where it's been most successful, online learning platforms, right? Canvas, some of those places where I have a bunch of student behavior captured in a browser. When are you logging on? What are you engaging in? How long are you reading something? When you
Interesting.
submit an assignment, what's the quality of that? What grade do you get back? What are the feedback the teacher's giving you? Those kinds of things. Um, but yeah, no, again, this is where kind of going back to I know some of the things that I've thrown out maybe in the MLOps community. Love that people are building some of these crazy systems, but a lot of the stuff we've talked about today are data challenges. And
Yeah.
like, how can I start getting the data I need for some of these very important real world problems? To then even, I mean, we can just start classic ML. We don't even have to get crazy. Like, let's just do something to help out some of these kids. Cause, a lot of times they, fall through the cracks.
Yeah.
And you have a tough start in kindergarten, it can cascade through elementary school and maybe hard to catch up. But
And it is so true that it's a data challenge, in that if you're in a class, you're a teacher in a class with 30 kids, how are you getting the data to know what these folks need in these moments? And so it makes sense that if they're interacting with a website, you can get much richer data. Or if you have them do these assessment tests, that's a great start too. But I feel like, yeah, you got to constantly be capturing that data.
oh, yeah. And I mean, don't get me wrong, there's some really cool research going on. Um, I put cameras in rooms.
Oh, wow.
Right now, I'm tracking what is every kid doing throughout the day. What are they getting exposed to? What's their behavior? All that kind of fun stuff. Look like most kids are on iPads these days. So now imagine I can start integrating data from multiple sources. Again, I've only seen this research perspective, primarily in maybe a hospital, mental health setting, um, large public spaces. Right, I'm trying to understand where people walk, whatever. So we do have some computer vision technology that I think allows us to at least start playing with these data sets. I've only seen this stuff research wise, never haven't really seen a product, right? Nobody offering, hey, K-12 school, buy my cameras and we'll, do this stuff for you. I
Yeah,
don't think it's in their budget, even if they were interested
exactly.
in something like that. But yeah, I think that, yeah, technology's there.
That's gotta be the hardest part, is like, we've got this great technology to help your students,
Yeah.
but it's super advanced and it probably isn't cheap.
Yes. Oh, exactly. Yeah. And that's where, I think some of the people in the MLOps community, they have these skills, work incredibly smart, talented, working on stuff. And I know half the challenge, like we mentioned, is can I get the data? Can I make it the ROI worth it for a product to be built? And I have to imagine people out there in the community have the answers. It's just, you know, yeah, get them
Yeah,
to
get that
focus
data,
on this
man.
or something. But yeah,
Get that context. I really like that idea of like, how can we get more data to get more context for the kind of stuff that is going to make an impact? And it doesn't necessarily need to be context for your LLM context window.
that's right. That's right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. But I think I actually love you said that because I think if you look at behavior science literature, whether it's a human, whether it's a a frog, an eagle, whatever, we understand behavior by understanding that larger context within which it behaves. And there's a great analogy with LLMs, right? The more the LLM understands, hey, this is what I need you to do, and like here's the information you need, better output. Same is true with humans, right? It's just we talk a lot. We love language, and so often we default to talking with people. Why do you feel that way? Why are you doing what you're doing? But there are other ways to understand why we do what we do that are often more accurate, but more data intensive.
Yeah.
Requires people like the people in the MLOps community to run those through algorithms to extract the insights and put it in front of a teacher who's not going to be coding in Python, right? They just need the dashboard or something. But
Exactly. They need that product, that end user product.
exactly, yeah, yeah.